the Imperial Dreadnought. Crimson Talon hung in space like a metallic serpent, its hull gleaming with the blood-red paint that marked all vessels of the Draconic Imperium. Within its massive hangar bay, Jihan knelt beside a damaged fighter craft, her calloused hands working methodically on its quantum drive core. Oil stains marked her worn coveralls, and her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail that had seen better days. She was human, one of the few remaining after the Draconic conquest 30 years prior. Most of her kind had been enslaved or worse, but Jihan possessed a rare gift. She could repair anything mechanical, often making improvements that baffled even the Empire's best engineers. It was this talent that kept her alive and relatively free aboard the flagship of Empress Vexithera herself. The hangar fell silent as the distinctive click of clawed feet on metal announced the arrival of someone important. Jihan didn't look up from her work. She'd learned long ago that acknowledging the presence of draconic nobles without permission was a punishable offense. "You there? Human," came a voice like silk wrapped around steel. "Explain why this fighter's performance has improved by 37% since your modifications." Jihan's breath caught. That voice belonged to Empress Vexithera, the dragon lady herself. 7 feet of scaled magnificence whose very presence could make grown warriors weep. The Empress was legendary for her cruelty, her strategic brilliance, and her collection of trophies taken from conquered worlds. "Your Imperial Majesty," Jihan said carefully, still focused on her tools. The original quantum coil configuration was inefficient. I realigned the flux capacitors and, "Look at me when you speak." Jihan slowly raised her head. Empress Vexithara was even more imposing up close. Crimson scales that seemed to glow within her fire, golden eyes that held the weight of conquered galaxies, and an aura of absolute power. But it was what hung around the Empress's neck that made Jihan's blood run cold. A simple silver pendant in the shape of Earth's moon, worn smooth by decades of handling. It was small, insignificant compared to the other jewels adorning the Empress. But to Jihan it might as well have been the most precious thing in the universe. "You stare at my trophy," the Empress observed, one clawed hand touching the pendant. "This bauble came from the human homeworld, a fitting reminder of a conquered species." Jihan's hands trembled, but she couldn't look away. Her mother had worn an identical pendant, had never taken it off even in the darkest days of the war. The last time Jihan had seen her mother alive, that pendant had caught the light of burning cities as she pushed 5-year-old Jihan into an escape pod. "That pendant," Jihan whispered, her voice barely audible over the hangar's ambient noise. "That pendant belonged to my mother." The temperature in the hangar seemed to drop several degrees. Every draconic officer within earshot went perfectly still, waiting for the Empress to strike down the impudent human. Even the maintenance drones stopped their humming, but Empress Vexithera didn't move. Instead, she studied Jihan with those golden eyes, her expression unreadable. "Your mother," the Empress repeated slowly. "Tell me about her." Jihan knew she was probably signing her own death warrant, but 30 years of suppressed grief and rage bubbled to the surface. Dr. Sarah Chen. She was a xenobiologist on the first contact team. She believed in peace and understanding between species. She died trying to protect human refugees when your forces bombed the evacuation centers. The Empress's claws flexed, but her voice remained steady. "Dr. Sarah Chen, I remember that name." "She tried to negotiate with your forces," Jihan continued, tears now flowing freely. "She thought there could be coexistence. Instead, your generals made examples of the terrorist sympathizers." What happened next defied everything Jihan knew about the Dragon Lady Empress. Vexithara's hand moved to the pendant, and for just a moment, her imposing facade cracked. Something almost like pain flickered across her features. "Your mother," the Empress said quietly, "was the first human to speak our language correctly." She pronounced the ceremonial greeting without stumbling over the tonal requirements. "My father, Emperor Krexmore, was impressed." Jihan stared in confusion. "What?"
"She was brought before the imperial throne as a curiosity," Vexithara continued, her voice taking on a strange quality.
"A human who showed proper respect for draconic culture." She spoke of peace, of scientific exchange, of the wonders both species could accomplish together. The Empress's golden eyes grew distant. "My father listened," For the first time in Draconic history, he considered alternatives to conquest. Your mother's words, they reached something in him that centuries of warfare had not touched. Then why? Jihan began. Because I was young and proud and foolish, Vexthara snapped, her composure returning. I saw her influence on my father as weakness. I convinced the War Council that humans were manipulative parasites who would corrupt our strength. She paused, her claws digging into her palms. I ordered the bombing that killed her. The hangar remained frozen in silence. Jihan felt as though the artificial gravity had failed. The revelation left her floating in a space between rage and understanding. This pendant was found in the ruins, the Empress continued. I kept it as a reminder of the necessity of strength over sentiment. But lately I find myself wondering, what if she had been right? What if there had been another way? Jihan looked at this legendary conqueror, this dragon lady who had crushed 100 worlds and saw something unexpected. Doubt, regret, the burden of choices that could never be unmade. She believed in redemption, Jihan said finally. Even for those who had done terrible things. She used to say that wisdom meant learning from our worst mistakes. The Empress studied the pendant in her claws, then slowly lifted the chain from around her neck. Your mother's wisdom died with her because of my pride. Perhaps some small part of it can live on through you. She held out the pendant to Jihan, who took it with shaking hands. You will continue your work here, Vexthara declared, her imperial bearing returning. But now you work not as a slave, but as chief engineer. And perhaps you can help an old dragon learn what your mother tried to teach. As the Empress strode away, Jihan clutched the pendant to her chest and wondered if her mother, wherever she was, could see this impossible moment. A step toward the peace she had died believing in. The first step of many.